Welcome to Biztech Technology Show, the show where we feature tech companies operating globally, talking about their solutions and how they make a difference to their customers' businesses. Today, we speak to Scott Monro, Regional Vice President, Asia and Korea at Okta. Now, Okta is the leading independent identity provider that secures critical resources from cloud to ground for workforce and customers. Now, here to tell us more is Scott. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brian. Lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great opportunity, so thank you.
Now, could you start by giving us an overview of Okta and its history?
Yeah, well, I mean, I thought you introed that very well. So you're right. I mean, Okta is the world leading, and I should also say independent identity provider. As you mentioned, we securely connect any person with any application on any device. Okta was born and built in the cloud, and being such, and hence runs in the cloud on a secure and reliable, extensive audited platform. And that integrates deeply with the on-premise applications as well and directories. For Okta, we have more than 7,000 pre-built integrations to applications. So Okta is providing a simple and secure access to people and organizations everywhere. We also now have more than 14,000 organizations, including the likes of AIA, SK Inc., Singapore Press Holdings, Coupang, and Globe Telecom, just to mention some of the ones in Asia, who are trusting Okta every day to help protect the identities for their workforce, but also their customers.
Okay, so Scott, tell us a little bit more about your products and solution suite.
Yeah, so we kind of look at Okta in kind of two facets or two sides of the fence. We have our workforce side, which is protecting the company's employees. And then we have what's called Customer Identity Access Management, which is CIAM, which is as it says, the customer's identity. So the customers like AIA rely on Okta for their workforce, but also their customer platforms as well, allowing their security and ease for their customers to be able to access them via the applications.
Now, in Asia itself, where have you found the biggest success in terms of markets, in terms of sectors as well?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, Brian. I do often get asked this, and honestly, I'll give you two answers. But honestly, my answer is often it's more where we aren't seeing, because with what Okta does and being independent, we're across sectors, we're across industries. But what I will say, and I think particularly we've seen it growing with the pandemic, the ones that kind of stand out is certainly the FIS, the fintech areas. That's certainly something that's top of mind. But e-commerce, retail, manufacturing, education is big. There's some of the ones that come to mind. But we really have a wide and deep cross-section of industries and customers.
Okay, give us some examples then of specifically how customers use your solutions.
Yeah, so for example, if we think about SK Inc. in Korea, they're a Fortune 500 company. They've got many subsidiaries, and they rely on Okta to secure their workforce. So regardless of the subsidiaries, they're relying on Okta for what we call single sign-on, or as we say, SSO, but also MFA and multi-factor authentication. And that's on the workforce side. This has become very prevalent, and then I think about customers like AIA and Coupang in Korea, AIA out of Hong Kong. When the pandemic hit, one thing that happened very quickly for a lot of organizations, and most, it became a remote workforce, and in some instances overnight. And this is where Okta really was able to step in and help with this change. And some customers, a lot of, as you can expect, weren't ready for that. We weren't ready for that pandemic and that wave to happen so quickly. So what Okta does is allowing those employees to work remotely, but more importantly, work securely and access the applications of the company in a secure environment from anywhere.
So companies like yours basically grew on steroids over the pandemic because of this move to work from home.
Yeah, look, it was interesting. It came in waves. And as we know in Asia, we had a different kind of trajectory than if I think about the US when it came to COVID, and there were different variables depending on the region. So we certainly saw an acceleration when COVID first hit, and some of these key customers really needed to make moves fast. We also see customers that just kind of went into the bunker, weren't too prepared, weren't ready to make a change. And then we saw them move to that change kind of 6 months later when we saw, look, the pandemic is not going away. And 2 years on, it still hasn't. So it did come in waves, but Okta certainly accelerated that remote workforce specifically.
So what do you see in terms of, because this change has happened over the 2 years, and now basically it's almost business as usual for a lot of companies. But what are some key trends that you see emerging in the cybersecurity front? Because essentially, when you have that is one of the key things that in Asia, we started to see a lot more emphasis on during the pandemic.
Yeah, we certainly did, Brian, and like you rightly so said, in Asia. You know, zero trust was a term a few years ago that people kind of had to look up. It's now very much front of mind. So I think particularly if we think about these emerging trends and coming into 2022, zero trust continues to be top of mind. Previously, I would suggest that was more so top of mind for IT departments, but we've seen a real shift during this pandemic, whereas zero trust is really now at the C-level, including decision-making, but also at the board level. You know, many have focused on 2021 on planning of their organizations and their long-term recovery and growth under a refreshed IT infrastructure designed to support the changing demands of a hybrid workforce. You know, and for me personally, identity in the past few years prior to the pandemic has often been seen as a secondary thought, to be honest. Whereas we've seen a noticeable shift to identity being first. You know, and what's interesting, and I've talked about this previously, and it's common knowledge, I think, but over 80% of company leaders now plan to allow employees to work remotely, at least part-time post the pandemic. You know, and from a recruitment standpoint, being remote has become increasingly crucial for organizations to look and attract top talent. I know personally, I interview people every day. Two of the most common questions I'm asked outside of the actual role, it's around the company culture. That's become critically important to people. You know, we've heard about the great resignation and these sort of things. So company culture is top of mind for people, but as is the ability for flexible work. Those two things I'm asked every day. And then when we think about consumer side, consumers are expecting more out of organizations, and not just financial institutions, but to provide them with the option to use, you know, phishing restraint factors and the adoption of multi-factor authentication and the demise of legacy authentication tools, you know, such as passwords and SMS. You know, and I mentioned earlier that the identity is now top of mind for these C-level execs, but at times from the board down, you know, we're working with a customer now in Asia that identity has become part of zero trust, and zero trust has become an audit requirement for this multinational from the board level down. So there's some of the things that are definitely standing out to me across Asia.
And even at a consumer level, identity is such a top of mind issue now, because if you look in a Singapore context and what's happened with the recent phishing attacks with OCBC and stuff, that's really brought that stream of consciousness to the average consumer because it's impacted their pockets.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, we talk and think about it all day, every day at Okta naturally, but you're right. It was not top of mind for a consumer. You know, my parents are elderly. They know about multi-factor authentication, not because of me, because they're now asking me, oh, you know, how does this work? What do I have to do? Because their bank's now insisting on it. So you're seeing a big shift in the way consumers have to go to work with their companies. And organizations that aren't taking that step to secure their customers and the consumers, they're not going to survive. They're going to have attrition with their customer base, that's for sure.
And how do you think organizations are then actually rolling out strategies? I mean, what are some of the key things that large organizations are doing to protect themselves better?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, security is definitely front of mind, like we've talked about. And these attacks, they're not going away, and we're seeing them prevalent. You touched on Asia and some of the banking, which is true, and they're appearing almost daily. So, you know, definitely new technologies are needed to deal with these new attacks. And as such, you know, this technology includes decentralized identity management, passwordless authentication, and again, the customer identity access management, or as we call it, CIAM. You know, so for decentralized identity, which uses blockchain to eliminate risk and centralized databases, that gives more control and peace of mind over the personal information. And then, I mentioned multi-factor authentication. On that front, emerging passwordless security standards and technology advancements have moved to eliminate passwords, and that's also critical. And then organizations are increasingly realize that identity management is not just for the workforce, which I've talked about. And that was probably, well, definitely, that was what really, at the start of the pandemic, was front of mind, was, okay, how do we secure this workforce? But we have definitely seen this shift in the customer identity and applying it to the external, to the customers, which can both improve the online security, but also open up new revenue streams. So today, customer identity access management technologies can easily be harnessed to capture, manage the customer identity and profile data, but also allowing the business to better understand the customers and carry out targeted marketing activities, but more importantly, giving them a seamless user experience and a secure one. And that's what people are looking for. If I talk to the person on the street, the consumer or the user, they want a seamless experience and they want to feel that they're safe. It's as simple as that.
And Scott, you hit the nail on the head, because one of our previous interviews show was with the CIO Association of India. And one of the key findings that they did among FSI companies was the fact that the pandemic, through all the technologies that you mentioned, helped banks and insurance companies in India deliver a better customer experience.
Yeah.
Because essentially then, as you just pointed out, they actually know their customers a lot better now than they did previously.
Yeah, that's very true on the customer identity side. And user experience is key. We've all logged on, I'm sure we've all had experiences. We're all online all the time, and there are websites. I reach out to my team and say, guys, you need to go and talk to this company. This user experience is awful. People don't have time this day and age. Everyone's on the phones, everyone wants something quickly, everyone's on the move. And you want to be able to have a seamless experience, and we want to be able to protect that seamless experience. It's funny when I meet people that I haven't met before, and I don't mean in a business sense, in a personal sense. It's great when someone goes, oh yeah, Okta, we've got Okta. At a user level, they think it's fantastic because they just log on, one app, one login, no password, great, got everything. And I get a real joy out of that, hearing from the end user, not just the business side of it, the C-level and the IT teams.
Now, Scott, you mentioned one thing, but I want to zoom in on, it's around talent. And you recently launched a Business at Work report. Could you share some of the interesting findings that were in that report that you found out from the ground?
So Okta launched its 8th annual Business at Work report, as you mentioned. So the research on how global and Asia-Pacific organizations, employees work today, and the applications and the services they most widely use. So some of the standouts for me was global collaboration and security tools are two of the most popular categories of tools deployed through the Okta network. And we saw 28 and 31% year-on-year growth respectively. Probably not surprising to many, but Google Workspace, Zoom and Slack have won a large number of new customers across APAC. Google Workspace grew 68% year-on-year in terms of numbers in the region, while Slack and Zoom grew 40 and 37% respectively. And I don't think that would surprise anyone. And again, this comes back to this remote workforce where it's hard to get in front of customers now. It's a lot of virtual, as you and I are doing now. It'd be nice to sit down face to face, but often this is the way we're still conducting business. And then if we think compared to the previous report, what's I think really interesting is 70% of the fastest growing apps are new to the top 10. And that clearly shows the rapid shift to the remote workforce is driving that, and firms to adopt new technologies to keep their workforces connected and secure and productivity up. And then, multi-cloud platforms, finding quick adoption, being able to use workflows and productivity tools from, again, any location, any device has turned up as a business imperative. And then, of course, the final one I would mention, we've talked a lot about in one way or another, security. And it's no surprise that firms are continuing to, heavily invest in security apps, with the security solutions like Netscope is now the fastest growing app worldwide by a number of unique users. So they're just some of the ones top of mind from that report for me anyway.
Were there any surprises?
No, look, I don't think so, but I'm probably close enough to it to not be too surprised. like I said, I don't think too many would have been surprised by, the Google Workspace, the likes of Slack and Zoom. Maybe the surprise is the big shift, seeing 70% are new into this list. But again, that just really—
I think that's a huge number. 70%.
It's a huge number, and it really just does re-highlight what that shift to a remote workforce has done, and how companies have had to go back and look at how they adopt technologies to keep their workforce connected. But not only connected, but like I said, secure and productive.
Now, I want to zoom in a little bit on Okta, a company which has been quite acquisitive. You've made about 6 acquisitions and 17 investments over the years. But what stands out is now the fact that Auth0 is now part of Okta. That's a $6.5 billion acquisition last year. What does that mean for Okta's customers, and what opportunities does it spell for you in the region?
Yeah, look, that's an exciting one. That was a real game changer, like you mentioned. So we completed the acquisition of Auth0 last year in 2021. So that's hugely exciting for both companies to come and join as one, which we've now got that internal piece right as we go to market for our new financial year. So, now having that combined entity will give our customers more choices and flexibility in digital identity deployment and driving tenacious product value and enabling them to accelerate their innovation. So together we'll continue to shape the future of identity on the internet. We're empowering developers to build with the identity at the foundation. So Okta and Auth0 comprehensive, we're complementary, which is super important, and the flexible platforms solve every identity use case regardless of the audience or the user. So, for Auth0 was built by developers for developers, and application builders around the world who are loyal to Auth0 for its flexibility, its ease of use, scope of documentation, and developer-friendly experience. So with the combined expert across the developer communities and the enterprise, Okta and Auth0 will be providing an enhanced and breadth of identity solutions, which will even be better suited to integrate and quickly take to the modern stack of today's developer. So, for me, following the acquisition of Auth0, the total addressable market in Asia is increased dramatically. And for us, we're very excited about those growth opportunities that lie before us across the key verticals. I mentioned some of these earlier, but the FSI, the e-commerce, retail, telco, aviation, IT services, just to name a few. So it's very exciting as we go to market with under one roof with the 2 platforms.
So obviously now exciting times in 2022. Where are your key markets that you are focusing your attention on in Asia?
Look, we've got a very wide focus across, the bulk of the team sits here with me in Singapore, which is one of the entities. We opened up last year also our Korea entity, which is very exciting. We had a great year in 2021 with Korea with a team on the ground. We also have presence in Philippines on the ground and also in India. So we're not inhibited by countries. We also have an extensive partner network, and in 2021 we signed Exclusive Networks as our first distributor for Asia, who's focused on Southeast Asia. But the key markets at the moment, as I see them, or if I look back on 2021, it was probably Singapore, Hong Kong, Korea, Philippines, and the others around the Southeast Asia are certainly ones that are growing rapidly as we continue to expand our footprint here.
Scott, it's been a fascinating conversation and I've learned a lot. But before we leave, any final thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Look, I just think for me, I'm very passionate and I'm very lucky in what we do, and the value that Okta brings, and I'm excited about our continued expansion into the Asia region. I'm blessed to be here. I moved my whole family here to be closer to the action, and we love being in Singapore and based here. If it wasn't for the pandemic, we would have made that move a few years ago. So, for me, it's exciting, the road ahead. We're rapidly continuing our hiring is going through the roof. So the team's growing exponentially. We're spreading our reach across countries, and we're putting more people down across the region. So that's exciting times. And, again, I think for me, what I really like, and I said that earlier, is getting that opportunity to not just speak to business leaders, but to speak to the end users and hear how we're impacting their day in that seamless experience. So that excites me in itself.
Now, Scott, thank you very much for taking your time to come on this show.
It's been a pleasure, Brian. I've had a great chat, and I've appreciated your time. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, we've been speaking to Scott Monro, Regional Vice President, Asia and Korea at Okta. I'm Brian Fernandez on Biztech Technology Show. This video and podcast will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our various social media platforms. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thanks again for tuning in.